Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's have an interesting conversation. I've called this neoliberalism. What do I call it? Neoliberalism meets the battlefield in Ukraine. Let's talk. Hi, Garland Nixon here, and neoliberalism meets the battlefield in Ukraine. Um, the first thing I want to say is this: what inspired me to have this talk, if that's the right word, I don't know. What happens. What happens with me a lot of times is when I do, and I'm just turning off the sound on my phone. When I do a video, just I'm watching something, I'm listening to something, I'm reading something, and a particular thing pops into my mind, and if you know me, I like to take. I don't like to take. That's a bad way to put it. I automatically take different perspectives on things than a lot of other people. And I thought, we talk about the kinetic warfare in Ukraine, but let's go a little deeper as to what's behind it. That what kind of systems are going against each other, economic systems, cultural systems, etc. What is the clash between? Is this a clash between civilizations, ideologies? What is the real clash here? So I thought, I'll dig a little bit deeper in there into this. And one of the things that's fairly obvious is that this neoliberalism is at the heart of the Western economic, ideological, cultural changes, or that have been going on here recently, and kind of driving things. So I figured I'd talk about that a bit. And what really struck me was Joe Biden mentioned the cluster bombs, and he was asked about, a couple of things. The cocaine found in the White House. Well, that's an easy one, Hunter Biden. And that's an easy one. Well, I'll put it like this: it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes. Okay, it's not going to have to sit around. It's not going to take a year of contemplation to figure out where that came from. But at any rate, but the question was to Biden was, why is it that you're giving Ukraine cluster bombs? And, Biden just said, yeah, because we're out of ammo. In other words, that's all we got. We got nothing else. I mean, hey, we're running flat. And I thought to myself, it's interesting because based on my research here, there are those who may disagree with me. It appears that on one side, you have Russia that is able to adequately supply its troops with information, with ammunition for a long period of time. It appears that Russia has been preparing itself, I'll say not particularly for this war, maybe for this war, but Russia seems to have been preparing itself in case there is a conflict for some period of time. Everything from building new new war machines to holding on to old things, keeping them operable. I've seen, and people have condemned Russia for this. I've seen Russia use some very old big guns, some big howitzers from like the 50s and 60s, right? And they drag them out on the field and crank a shell in them, and some guy yanks on a lanyard. I mean, this is not, some of the stuff that Russia's using is not, computerized stuff. It's some guy yanks on a rope, yank, wham, and off goes around down range, right? And, you can say what you want about it, but one of the things that's been said is in some areas, Russia outnumbers Ukraine 10-1 in artillery. So they're putting their new stuff, their old stuff. Bottom line, there's some preparation, there's some thought, there's some planning that has gone into this on the Russian side. Let's talk about what's behind these things. And I'm going to forget Russia. Let's talk about the Western side, neoliberalism. We'll start off with what it is before we get into the dynamics of neoliberalism in this particular conflict. Let's talk about what it is. So I'll put it like this. I have my perspective of what it is. I'm not saying this is the definition of the neoliberalism. I'm saying this is my definition of neoliberalism. You might have a different definition. Michael Hudson might have a different definition, because this is something I'm trying to understand. I'm not, I don't have a PhD in economics. So this is how I see neoliberalism. In a nutshell, I'm going to sum it up. It is a self-serving racket. Neoliberalism is basically a economic and ideological method of doing a couple things. Number one, extracting money from the working class, the working poor, and redirecting that money up to the wealthy. They called it supply side economics. You have people saying we don't believe in the redistribution of money. Well, then you don't believe in the system that we're in, because the system we're in is clearly redistribution of money. And there are those who argue, if you look at the unthinkable numbers of trillions of dollars in wealth that have been redistributed to the wealthy, the only way to address that would be to redistribute it back down. But for some reason, it's some evil thing. It was perfectly fine to redistribute it to the top, but for some reason, redistributing it back down is unacceptable. So it's a self-serving racket that redistributes money from the working class, working poor to the wealthy. How does it do it? A number of ways. So they simply justify what they do. Let's start here. Taxes. You have regressive taxes, and basically what you say is we're going to lower taxes. Basically what happens in the United States, the Republican Party will say we're going to lower taxes. The Democratic Party will kind of go along with it enough to get it through, and what they'll do is they'll say we're going to lower taxes. We've got to lower taxes, and they'll do some gigantic tax cut, but 80 to 90% of it will go to the top 1%. So they'll do it and they'll say, okay, we're lowering taxes. And sadly, and all of the conservatives in the United States will clap their hands, jump up and down and say, hooray, they lowered taxes. But when you look at the numbers, it's neoliberal. The Republicans, the Democrats have done neoliberal tax cuts. 80 to 90% of it go to the wealthiest over and over and over again. That's one of the ways that neoliberalism is done. Regressive taxes. Make taxes so that the rich don't pay much of anything and the wealthy pay more and more taxes. Another way that you do the redistribution of money in neoliberalism, and I'm going somewhere with this, everybody, so don't think that I forgot about Ukraine, but I have to talk about neoliberalism first. I got to take 5 or 10 minutes to talk about the rigged game that is neoliberalism. And we go on. One of the things that they do is you substitute taxes with other things. So you say to the working stiff, you want to be a plumber. You've got to get plumbers license, plumbers permits, plumbers this, plumbers, and you raise the prices on all of that. So to be a working stiff, it costs you more and more money. But if you got a corporation, you lower the corporate taxes, you lower the prices for corporate permits, or you just do away with them. And you say, we got to do away with regulations, but you only do away with the regulations for the big corporations. The regulations for Joe the plumber, for Bill the engineer, for Tom the grass cutter, they expand. So you argue that you're lowering regulations, but you only lower them, just like taxes. The rich pay less taxes, the rich have fewer regulations. The poor person, for every tax cut they get, they have to pay 10 times more because you do things like you got to pay more tolls for roads. Oh, wait a minute, we're going to give you more parking tickets. Oh, wait a minute. One of the things they do in the United States is they have these cameras. They have speed cameras. They have parking. They have red light cameras. So you're driving along, and it's been shown. I've covered this. There'll be a red light camera. They will lower the amount of time that the yellow light stays yellow, so that it makes it easier for you to run the red light, and that boom, you have to pay $40, $30, $40, $50, $60, $70. So the average Joe out here who has to drive for work, go to work, drive his kids around, go to they're maybe a salesperson, they're paying all of these fines for red light tickets, speeding tickets, and they'll do things like this. 50, 60 miles an hour you can go on this road. Then all of a sudden there's one little teeny area where it'll drop to 35 or 40. And that's where the cameras are, the speed cameras. And then after that, so they set up speed traps. So one of the things that neoliberalism does is it replaces taxes with other ways to extract money from the working class, the working poor, and the poor. That's neoliberalism. Redistribution of money up. Recently, there's been some discussion of Bidenomics, right? Bidenomics is somehow different from Reaganomics, which was neoliberalism. Clintonomics, Obama, all that was neoliberalism. And people ask me, well, what's the difference between Bidenomics and neoliberalism? I say, that's easy. Neoliberalism says it's trickle down economics. We give all the money to the rich and powerful, and somehow, we don't know how, magically it will trickle down to you. Bidenomics is different. We don't even try to pretend like it's going to trickle down to you. We give all the money to the rich and powerful, and you shut the hell up. That's Bidenomics. They don't. But the good thing about Bidenomics is it doesn't fake you out. They don't pretend that money's going to trickle down, so that later on you can say, "How come it doesn't trickle down?" They just don't. We're giving the money to the rich. Shut up. It's going to Ukraine. Shut up. Oh, we got to buy stuff for us. Shut up. That's Bidenomics. Bidenomics is shut the hell up. The money's going to the rich, and you ain't got no say in it. Oh, by the way, if you try to bring it up, we'll censor you on YouTube, we'll censor you on Twitter, and we'll throw you off Facebook and Threads, whatever that the hell is. Get on Threads so we can censor it on you because you're running your damn mouth too much and you're asking too many questions. That's Bidenomics. Bidenomics is they just censor you. You get nothing, and they don't. One thing I'll give Bidenomics though, they don't pretend. You're right. Okay, so. It's a self-serving bracket. I'll say this about the neoliberalism and one more thing about neoliberalism and the issue of regulations. And I think that is important before we move into Ukraine. We build our foundation of neoliberalism and then we move into Ukraine, because neoliberalism is not the Republicans. It's not the Democrats. It is the ideology of the United States. It is the economic ideology of the United States. It is what our form of capitalism has morphed into. This is what it's become. It has become a neoliberal bracket. But the issue, before we move into Ukraine, we'll talk about the issue of regulations, because one of the foundations of neoliberalism is a contradiction, is in itself a contradiction. And this is something that conservatives in the United States really hold on to. They really grab and hug, but it is an inherent contradiction. Let me tell you what it is right now. The neoliberalism, the neoliberal contradiction when it comes to regulations is this. It start with a corporation. What is a corporation? It is an entity that is created by government regulation. Government regulations, government rules, government laws say that a group of people can come together and create a fictional entity. We'll call that entity a corporation. It could be an LLC, limited liability corporation. It could be, sole proprietorship. There's any numbers of corporations, but it creates a dynamic where people can come together and they can create an entity to do business. And one of the great things about that entity is it shields them from liability. Think about the term limited liability corporation. You're limiting your liability. You and I, me and Chicken Patty and Valley S and Glenn and Peter, we all get together and we now have a corporation called Neoliberal, Inc. And why can we create that corporation? Because of government rules and regulations and laws create a dynamic, create an environment where there's government regulations that A, reduce our individual liability, B, reduce our collective liability, allow us to walk away at any time, shut this thing down no matter how much we owe, and then go start another one and just name it. Well, this one will be called Neoliberal 1. The next one will be called Neoliberal 2 Inc. And it doesn't matter. We could owe $1 billion. We shut it down. We go bankrupt. We start another one. It limits our liability and it allows us to just jump around economically any way we want to. The corporation the government creates that, limits our liability, right? Okay. Amongst other things, and protects us. The government then says we're going to have patent laws. So Garland and Patty and Valley S and everybody have created something. We get a patent on it. Nobody else can make that. The government protects our liability, right? The government protects our through patent laws. It protects the things that we have. Intellectual properties laws, our thoughts and ideas, we can protect those. So the government creates a dynamic where we come together, where our liability is limited, and the government's there to protect us. And if we want to sue somebody, we go to a government court and sue them, and the government handles it. The government is there for us. Without government regulations, there could be no corporations. There could be no liability limited. There could be none of the stuff for corporations without government regulation. So now we create that. And then we say, We hate government regulations. What do you mean? They stop us from doing anything. We can't do anything. We can't have government regulations because we can't go out and do business without government regulations. So a corporation comes together as a result of government regulations to protect its liability. A government comes together as a result of government corporations to be protected by the government. And if you understand the history of U.S. government slash corporate interference, if you look at the history of the United Fruit Company, Nestle's, the Shell, etc., you start understanding that the government, as Tom Friedman says about neoliberalism, you can't have McDonald's without McDonnell Douglas. The government goes in and overthrows countries, literally goes in and does coups, all of this on behalf of corporations. So the corporations are created, protected by the government, and then the government marauds around the world, overthrowing governments, destroying things, murdering people, slaughtering, utilizing the CIA, utilizing the military on behalf of corporations. And then those corporations say, we don't want the government involved. We don't want government rules and regulations. Government has to get out of business. There is an inherent contradiction there, isn't it? I defy the person who is the most opposed to government regulations that there is to say that there's not a contradiction for the government to create a corporation, to protect the corporations through patent laws, to protect the corporation through liability, and then for that corporation to say we don't like the government and we don't want any government regulations except the ones that create us and protect us. That's neoliberalism, an inherited contradiction, a self-serving racket in every way. Pardon me, had to have some water. All right. You know, when I used to be on a police boat, right? When I was on a police boat, one of the jokes we'd say is, you know, they say, you're going to eat lunch? And we say, no, we're Marine police. We don't eat. You water us and we grow. So just an old stupid joke from people who a guy who did search and rescue on a police boat for years on the Chesapeake Bay. All right. But I digress. Somebody has, I would rather party with Biden Jr. Yeah, he left his cocaine in the White House. That's his problem. He left his baggie. You think they'll do fingerprints on that baggie? Gee, I wonder whose fingerprints they'll find. Anyway, so let's go on. So now that we've gotten into the foundation of neoliberalism and why Garland sees it as a self-serving racket, if in fact it is a self-serving racket, people say it doesn't work, and I will say, well, it does. Like any racket works. It works to fill the pockets of the people who are in on the racket. The rest, not so good. So what we have now is neoliberalism visiting itself upon the battlefield in Ukraine. And here's the bottom line. If you think about it, what the neoliberal oligarch, globalist, whatever you want to call them, right? Their thing is, and this is part of it, they have... this is critical before I get to Ukraine, because this is the foundation of the discussion here when it comes to Ukraine. The capitalism in and of itself is that the idea is to make a profit, right? If everybody works, if every corporation works as hard as it can to make as great a profit as it can, then things will magically somehow work out and everything will work out right. If you just do that, everybody works to make a profit. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not one to say I'm for capitalism. I'm for socialism. I'm for something that works. I'm for things that work. If you're for capitalism and against socialism, or for socialism and against capitalism, I understand that, but you're for a word. Words don't work. Methods work. You're for a word. You're for a term. Capitalism and socialism may not mean the same to you as it does to someone else. Words don't work. Methods work. And then people say a hybrid. Well, I don't care what you call it. Something that works in the best interest of the masses. That's for me. That's what I'm for, right? Now, one of the things that has happened, again, this is critical when you talk about Ukraine. One of the things that has happened is that the form of capitalism, whatever you want to call it, that is practiced here in the West, has discovered something, and that is, look, we can make widgets, we can make things with a corporation, and we can make money. Yes, we can do that. That's kind of hard to do. You got to have raw materials, you got to pay workers, things of that nature. Your workers cut into the profit, and oh, that's a problem. So what they discovered was we'll go in a different direction. It's called financialization, right? So you've got really, I would argue, a couple of different economic systems. You've got agricultural, right? You've got the good old fashioned countries where you grow something and you trade something and you eat something, right? You've got industrial, where, and then there's, combinations where you make lots of stuff. I would argue that over and all, China is mostly industrial, but it's part commodities. They make things, they mine and things like that too, right? Then you've got Russia that is huge. They got a lot of land, a lot of commodities, but a lot of industry too. They got a lot of commodities, a lot of industry. They're kind of a little bit of everything, right? And you've got the West led by the US with neoliberalism. And what they discovered was, look, hey, number one, we got the dollar, and that's important. So we can print dollars, but we can make up a system in which we just come up with magical ways to make money. We'll call them things. We'll call them asset-backed securities. We'll call them derivatives. We'll call them things like that. We don't really understand what they are. We'll make them so complicated that nobody even understands it. We'll take a bunch of slabs, student loan asset-backed securities. We'll take a bunch of student loans, $500 billion worth of student loans, and we'll carve them up in a way that nobody really understands what they are. And we'll sell those little carved slices. And we'll say those little carved slices are going to bring back some percentage rate. And then we'll sell those, and we'll call them asset-backed securities. They're backed by student loans. I'm not really sure what they are or how they work, but this huge derivatives market. We got futures markets where people are betting on things that are going to happen in the future. Now they're betting on things that you can do. You can bet on things that will go bad. You'll say, I think that stock's going to go down, and I'm going to bet on that. So we've gone from a commodity where we basically dig stuff out of the ground, or mining, things like that, industry where we make things, to simply creating magical Wall Street economic tools. And somehow money comes from that. And the only reason it comes from that is because the whole system is ours. So once we create a bunch of magical tools, once those magical tools fall apart, we just print more money and fill a hole. Right? That magical tool didn't work on Wall Street, and it lost $1 billion. It lost $1 trillion. We just go print another trillion and fill that up. And then we just keep saying this system we have works. Why? Because we can print money and fill out the holes as they fall apart. Okay, so what happens? So then this neoliberal system decides, well, we got to go around the world and we must get cheap resources, as cheap as possible. And we'll use treacherous machinations to go around the world and overthrow countries in Africa and Middle East and wherever. And we'll do that in a way that we can control these countries, control their resources, control the shipping lanes, control all of that stuff. And we can get paid. Now, at some point, there were growth from other countries, Russia, China, India, Iran, etc. And the US has been struggling. If you think about this, the US is now saying we must contain Russia and contain China. In other words, they're not allowed to grow economically large enough that they could present an alternative for other countries, right? That's what we've been doing all along. That's what we've been doing with Venezuela. They got all that oil. We've been the sanctions. We've argued, we've lied, we've said we're going against Venezuela because they're evil or they're dictators or whatever. All lies. Venezuela has a lot of oil, and it had a potential in South America to be the Saudi Arabia of South America, to be a very, very rich country. And when Venezuela had lots of money, when Hugo Chavez was there, they shared that with other poor people. They shared it with Nicaragua. They had Petro-Caribe. They shared it with Haiti, other countries. We couldn't have that. The United States was not going to have Venezuela lifting other countries up, providing another option. So the United States has said, we're going to contain Venezuela. This has been about containing countries. And now the U.S. has gotten to the point where it's trying to contain Russia and China. And Russia doesn't listen at all. Russia ain't listening. Russia's like, screw you. We're powerful enough to resist. So the U.S. then says, okay, we're going to get this proxy army. And this is where we're getting to this part, to the good part, I guess, if it's good. We got this proxy army. We're going to build this gigantic proxy army in Ukraine, and then we're going to throw it at Russia. And we understand that army is never going to beat Russia. They knew it from the beginning. They said it's there to weaken Russia. We remember we want to contain Russia. We want to weaken Russia. We want to put this army in there, and that's going to then give us the excuse we need for massive sanctions against Russia, and we can take Russia out with the sanctions, which of course didn't work because, again, neoliberalism is magic, but Russia has stuff they sell, actual stuff and stuff they make, and people need stuff in this world. They need energy, they need logs, they need coal, they need all that crap, and if you need it, Russia's got it. Okay, so on the battlefield, something has been happening in the US for years, in the West for years, that has manifested itself on the battlefield in Ukraine. I used to work for this company when I first retired from law enforcement. I taught at a college for a while. It was fun. Taught organized crime and various things, some constitutional law, things like that. But I worked for this company before my journalism career really worked out well. I worked for this company. It was called ASG Security, Alarm Security Group. And they did alarms, they did commercial, they did home, they did, this is going to be very important. This is very critical in the context of this conversation. So this company did all kinds of stuff. You name it. If you're building some building and you want the swipe cards and you want cameras and you're going to put buildings all over the country and you want those cameras to be networked and you name it, we did it. Any of that stuff, we did it, right? And it was a great company and it was great to work for. And it was owned by a small group of guys who I knew. And they put together a few $1 million each, got this thing going in 2000, and they kept it for about 15 years. 2016, right? They had a few million each in it. 2016, they sold this company came, this big Wall Street called Apollo Holdings, venture capitalist firm came along, and I think they like 250 million. Well, you know what? If I got a few million in a company and it's 4 or 5 guys and you give me 250 million for it, it is gone. And Apollo Holdings bought Pro One. They bought ADT. They spent billions, right? Billions, because money was no object. And they started putting these companies together. But let me put it to you what happened. After the neoliberalism, they came in and they bought this company, and the company went straight to hell. They bought the company as an investment. They didn't buy the company. The people that owned the company knew about security. I knew about security. These people knew about security. We knew about networking. We knew about all of that stuff, man. We could put this stuff together, man. It was awesome. It worked on your phone, your computers. It'd send you notifications, anything you could think of high tech. We had it, right? They didn't care about that stuff. They bought this and they just stuck all the companies together as one. They kind of took some of them apart. And ended up with a piece of crap, with a very, very poor output. Now, here's my point. When you go into a war, behind that war, there's an industrial capacity, and there are corporations that are making things. If they're neoliberal corporations, what they make is a profit. If it's a neoliberal corporation that makes whatever it is, Jeeps or tanks or you name it, whatever it's making, right? The neoliberal corporations and the corporations operating in a neoliberal environment for decades now haven't been working to make the best tanks. They haven't been working to make the best missiles. They haven't been working to make the best planes or ships. They make the F-35, which many scientists, a number of pilots say it flies like a piano. Right? Not a good plane. Terrible. Lots of problems with it. Lots of problems with a lot of these things. You see, they make these high tech, the M777s, right? The howitzers. A lot of problems with them. So they make a lot of things. These neoliberal corporations. As I said, they get bought. They get stuck together. But these corporations are an investment. They are not designed for the final output of product. They're designed to make a profit. It's like a lot of food. People say, I'm going to buy that. That's food. I said, it ain't food. It is a product. If it's food, it's a totally different thing. You got to think about, pay attention to what you're buying. You got to read the label of what you're buying to figure out whether it's food. Oftentimes it ain't food. It's a product. And products will kill you. And what you have now, what we're seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine, is a number of things that they're not military hardware, they're products. And because they're products, they're there for not to defend the country. In this instance, they ain't defending anything, not to prosecute a military engagement, not to defeat the enemy. No, that's not the idea here. Now, I'll say this. When the Russians take one of those old howitzers out of mothballs from the 1950s and slap some gun oil all over it and yank on that thing and fire it off a couple times to get the mothballs out, drop around down there, yank on the end of that lanyard, and that thing goes boom and throws around down. That ain't there to make a profit. That is there to do one thing and one thing only: to throw around down range. Now, don't get me wrong. It may not be it may not be hitting on the mark. You may not be able to put a little X on a sidewalk somewhere and have that particular howitzer drop that round right on that X, but it's going to drop somewhere in the area. And if you're around there, you ain't going to be happy. And if there's enough of them throwing enough rounds down range, ain't nobody in that area going to have a nice day, right? That's war. War does not have to be precision. That's the idea. You ever heard the old joke when people say, that was close, and somebody says close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades? That's it. Hand grenades, artillery. That's where close counts. You don't, yeah. Artillery. You ever seen an artillery round? Watch a video where they hit, boom, there's an explosion, and there is shrapnel going in all directions. You don't want to be anywhere near where artillery rounds are hitting, because a piece of hot metal is going to get you. Right? That's the idea. So the things that the Russians are making tend to be less precision. Not that they don't make precision munitions. The Russians make precision munitions, but their focus is on munitions first, precision second. So they have some things that are high precision munitions, and they specifically use high precision munitions for striking a particular target that you need that for. But overall, in a war, you just need something that's going to put a lot of rounds down range. And an old school economy such as the Russians, the one that makes stuff and builds stuff and cuts down trees and timber, and some slump goes down in the salt mines or the coal mines and digs coal, and that comes out and stuff like that. And it's not going to be pretty. And that ain't the idea. And so what you have on the Russian side in Ukraine are things that are practical. They're not super expensive. The M777 howitzer, I wouldn't even want to think how much that thing costs. It has like certain kinds of gas in it that it has to have. And if it's not done correctly, after so many times, it can crack, and it has to go back to have the gas things filled. It has like gas shock absorbers. But when it goes, the Russians ain't got that crap. I'm not going to say they don't have some of that stuff, but that's not the foundation of their military supply line. It is on howitzer that, don't get me, and I'm not trying to say that the Russians are out there with old 1950s stuff. I'm trying to say that it is a different perspective. Neoliberalism, the corporations, here's my point. The corporations in a Russia or a China that makes military hardware. Oftentimes, more often than not, it's run by the government. So there's no profit involved. There's no extra administrative. People are not doing things to try to buy back their stock and make more money so that they can make a greater profit off of that howitzer. No. It's the government owns most of it, and they're trying to put out as much as they can, as quickly as they can, but make it what they put out work. On the other side, we have one of the problems we're having. One of the reasons that the neoliberal economies can't keep up is because these high precision, these high tech munitions are much more expensive. And if the foundation of your economy is for profit and profit only, and you believe, see, the Russians, the Chinese, they believe that when it comes to military hardware, you're better off for the government to own most of it. And most of this stuff. And you've got some of the things right now, the Russians, some of the things that were private, the Russians are unprivatizing them and taking them over. Why? Because it's war. And in war, they're like, look, it'll be more effective if the government runs it. It'll be cheaper if the government runs it. And the government's persecuting the war prosecuting the war, the government wants to have a hand in designing the things for the war, saying we're fighting in this area. We want to look. They might want to send their generals down to look at it and say, "Hey, look, make sure when you whatever tracks you make for this particular armored personnel carrier, the area that we're in has a lot of mud in the wintertime, blah blah blah." So specifically, they can design that stuff for the environment that they're in. So the government wants to have a closer hand in it. The military, the people who are using, want to have a closer hand in the design and the production of it, and therefore it can be more effective. If the government's making it, there ain't no profit in it. What you want is it to be effective. You want it to be, you want efficient ways of making it so you can make as many tanks as possible. But you might start making them in the government, and the military guys may come in and say those tracks aren't wide enough. Why? Because we got to, it rains and we get a lot of mud in the middle of the winter. Those skinny tracks are going to get us widen the tracks, right? Well, in the U.S., it's like this. Hey, let's go with the skinnier tracks. Why? Because skinnier tracks use 20% less metal. And if we use 20% less metal, we can raise our prices by 5-6% or keep them the same. And guess what? We'll get 20% greater profit off of those. They're still looking at it in the midst of a war or whatever. Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics is still looking at it as how much profit can we make? I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm not taking an ideological position on profit. I'm simply saying that this is a part of this battle is people who believe that the God of profit should run your economy, that your economy is better off if everything is done for a profit and the government protects the profits of the corporations. You may agree with me, you may not. Doesn't matter. I mean, you may agree with them, you may not. It doesn't matter. That's what's going on. The government creates the corporations through regulations, and then the government gets out of their way and protects them. It creates them and protects them, but it doesn't regulate them as to what they can or can't do. It just simply creates them in the environment where they can be there, and then it protects them from anybody who will come along and say, you screwed over me, you did me dirty, you did me wrong, whatever the case. It protects the corporations in case the employees want to come together and say, we don't think we're getting a fair shake from the corporation. The government then steps in and says, hey, we do not get involved in anything to do with the corporation unless the employees come together and say that they're going to have some kind of an organized labor and that they're going to push back against their bosses. Well, then the government will come in to protect the corporate owners from the employees. That's a good thing. We don't want any unions. Got to stop them because that would be organized labor. That's part of neoliberalism. You got to stop organized labor. Organized labor is bad. Organized capital is good as part of neoliberalism. And so the result, I believe, is this. The result is what you see is this. You're seeing a lot of high-tech stuff coming into Ukraine, but it's the amount that they can make is limited because it's very expensive to make, and because the government it is designed to make a profit. I put it like this: if you're making a profit, what are you better off? To make 100 howitzers with a little teeny bit of profit on each one, but you can spick out lots of howitzers, or 10 howitzers which are loaded with profit, which each one of those howitzers costs what all 100 of those. 100 howitzers will cost, let's start $1 million of money. You can make 100 howitzers for $1 million, right? 100 of them for $1 million. You're the corporation. You're the neoliberal corporation. Okay, you make the 100 boom, they go for $1 million. Or you can make one howitzer that costs $1.5 million each and sell those. Well, if you're a neoliberal corporation, that's an easy one. Now, if you're a country going to war, you want the 100 howitzers as quickly as possible. If you're a corporation making a profit, you want the one that sells at 1.5 million because the profit is better. It doesn't matter. It's not going to win you the war. And that one, in order to justify 1.5 million for it, you've got to have all kinds of computers and all kinds of things like that, that if they get the slightest bit of mud or grit or dirt in them or whatever, they ain't going to work. And it's going to take you somebody forever to learn how to use them because they've got all of these space-based GPS, all this other crap stuff that it does. So some guys got to have a friggin' degree from MIT to fire this thing. Whereas if you got the old school howitzer, you say to this guy, we're going to train you how to use the howitzer. And you're like, great. All right. What do I do? You see that lanyard over there? Yeah. First, these three guys are going to shove a round in the barrel. Boom, round in the barrel. All right. Now what do I do? See that? Yeah. First, I want you to put your fingers in your ears, right? Yeah. Then the guy next to you, you're going to yell pull. He's going to yank the lanyard. Okay, I got my fingers in the ear. Let's go. Pull, yank, boom. There you go. You now know how to use it. Oh, by the way, as soon as you do that, you got this thing hooked up to a truck. Yeah, get the hell out of there, because very, very shortly a round is coming back at you. Do you think you can handle that? Yeah, your training is done. Let's see it again. Are your fingers in your ears? Yes. Yell, pull. What's that schmuck over there going to do? He's yanking on the rope. Yank on the rope. Boom. Yep. There you go. You're trained. We'll run through that one more time. Off to the battlefield with you. How hard is that? One guy yells pull, some guy yanks on the lanyard, down you go. And you got 100 of them lined up beside. On the other side, you've got some friggin' egghead with a pocket protector who's got a degree from Harvard, who's got to go spend 10 hours of computerized, training for everybody who has to even walk near that howitzer. And then they've got like laptops and all these things that they're hooking up to links and all of that. Meanwhile, you're spending an hour preparing to fire the howitzer. The other guy's yanking on the lanyard and rounds are coming at you. You ain't winning that one. That's not how you win a war. You know how you win a war? Yanking on a lanyard and throwing rounds down. That ain't saying the Russians don't have high-tech stuff. That's not belittling their stuff. It's saying that in a war, you must have, shall we say, a healthy balance between M777s and Challenger tanks and things like that, and some guy yanking on a lanyard, throwing around down range. And I think what we're looking at now in Ukraine is this. These people who, the neoliberals, who got rid of their industry, got rid of commodity, got rid of all of the stuff they were doing at home, came up with this magical way of creating money and thought to themselves, look, we can create and print unlimited amounts of money. And we'll take that unlimited amounts of money and we'll buy stuff. We'll set Ukraine up as a sharpened weapon on Russia's border to use against Russia. And then what we'll do is, we got so much unlimited funds that we can print, we can keep coming up with. We'll just keep buying stuff and we'll just keep throwing it into Ukraine, right? So what they felt like was their capital. They could continue to buy stuff. They could buy the good stuff that they're making. Oh boy, we're going to send Challenger tanks. They're really good. We're going to send M777s. We're going to send ATACMs. We're going to send Storm Shadows. All these things that we've spent all of this money and technology building, right? Unthinkable amounts of money. We're going to spend this money buying things and sending them to Ukraine. And in theory, if you think about it, they wanted to defeat Russia on the battlefield with Western capital. What do they kept saying? Send more, send more. We need more money. We need more money. We need more stuff. So realistically, on the battlefield, one could make an argument that it was neoliberal Western globalist capital versus Russia. They did. Look, does the US, France, the UK, do they want to send people? No. Do they want to send like their people over there and actually get in a war? No, hell no. They're going to use the poor damn Ukrainians. They're screwed. I mean, look, I hate to say it, but if let's look at Ukraine, for God's sake. These people are nothing but cannon fodder. They mean nothing. And the idea that they've created this discussion that has to do with supporting Ukraine, you're throwing these people in the minefields. How can anyone look at what's happening to Ukraine and call that support? Supporting Ukraine, helping Ukraine, looking out for Ukraine, doing something good for Ukraine. Ukraine What about the people of Ukraine? What's going on with their lives? Let's see. They got no electricity half of the time. Their jobs are all shot. It is now nothing but a welfare state where the US and the EU pay every single bill, everything. It pays for their heat, their electricity, pays their street sweepers, their policemen, their firemen. Every single bill in Ukraine is paid mostly by the US, but then partially by the EU. So the Ukraine is now just a society that unable to do anything for itself. It's being floated by the EU again and the US. The neoliberals saying, we got the money. So, okay, Ukraine is now no longer a viable corporation. We'll float it with our capital. We'll use this neoliberal capital that we print and we'll float it. Right. So now they're floating this country versus Russia. Russia doesn't have to float themselves. Russia makes stuff, builds stuff, sells stuff, digs stuff out of the ground, pumps stuff out of the ground. So they don't need someone from the outside to float them. They got stuff to sell. Yeah, does China buy a lot of the stuff? Could you argue that China's floating Russia? You could buy an argument, and that would be a valid argument, except for one problem, that China really does need the stuff that Russia sells. It's not like China's buying stuff from Russia and putting it on a shelf. It's not like they're like, hey, let's buy some oil and gas from Russia and we'll just throw it out. No, they really do need the things that Russia's selling. So Russia is actually still selling stuff, still making stuff, still mining stuff. So they're able to continue to go based on the money that they can make. They can support themselves. Ukraine doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. It's over. It's gone. It's done. And so now neoliberal capital flows into Ukraine and pays the bills for Ukraine, number one, and number two, keeps buying stuff. But the problem is neoliberalism and industry they don't work together. They don't work together. Neoliberalism, and that's why the neoliberalisms moved all of their industry to China. That's why they did that in the first place. The reason they did it was because if you have industry in a industrialized country, in a country where things are expensive, it costs so much for the workers to live because neoliberalism makes it more expensive. One of the things it does is it makes it more and more expensive for the working class, the working poor, and the poor to survive. So you can do what? You can extract more money for them. You make it more expensive for them to live. You extract more money for them. You make it difficult and not, dare I say, impossible for them to seek redress against the corporations by doing away with all your regulations. So if they want to sue or go after a company, they can't because there's no regulations. There's no government rules to say what a country can, what a company can and can't do. So neoliberalism now says we're going to fight Russia. Neoliberalism versus Russia. Neoliberalism means you've brought corporations together, but the corporations are neither efficient nor effective at doing anything but making a profit. If in fact, if a corporation could defeat Russia, if a military-industrial complex corporation could defeat Russia by buying back its own stock and increasing the value of its stock so that its board of directors and its owners and the people that are getting dividends from it make more money, why, if that would defeat Russia, Russia wouldn't have a chance. But unfortunately, that doesn't have any impact on the battlefield. So you've got corporations now who are sending things in, who are basically, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing, that they have neither the quantity nor the quality of military hardware they need to defeat Russia. So neoliberalism now is gone in and with things that don't work well, but they make a very good profit. And that you can't make a lot of them because they're too expensive to make. But you got a very nice, what's the term I'm looking for? Public relations background for these things, right? You have everybody convinced, your PR tools, your PR operations have everybody convinced that Patriot air defense systems are the finest in the world. These Patriot things are great. These Patriots are awesome. These Patriots are the best in the world. They brought them to Kiev. They turned them on. As soon as they turned them on, the Russians picked up where they were. Oh, what do you know? It looks like we got a radar unit being turned on in Kiev, a very powerful radar unit. Kind of looks like a Patriot. Let's get some eyes on that thing. You know, Kiev's full of Russian spies. The spies look at it. Yeah, boss, that's a Patriot system. All right, lock in the hypersonic missiles. They lock in the hypersonic missiles within an hour. There ain't no Patriot system, right? Why? Because the Patriot system costs a fortune, makes a lot of money. Sounds good in public relations, but it has no way to defend itself from a salvo of hypersonic missiles. It has no way of defending itself from one hypersonic missile. Can't do it, which means there's not that a Patriot air defense system is not an air defense system. You ain't an air defense system if you can't even defend yourselves from the missiles from your adversary. They have no defense for missiles. Now, what they were able to do after they got blown to smithereens, they were able to put out some public relations propaganda and say that they shot down one of the hypersonic missiles. It certainly appears that they didn't shoot down any of the hypersonic missiles, but people believed it. But the people who were manning the Patriot systems didn't believe it because they all got blown up. So what you have now is you have Patriot systems. And you have people saying, hey, let's do a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Really? And how are you going to do that? What are you going to do? Are you going to put a bunch of Patriot missile systems, air defense systems around Ukraine and say to the Russians, you can't fly or we'll shoot you down with our Patriot air defense systems? To which the Russians are going to reply, well, if you turn on those Patriot air defense systems, they're going to get a calling card from a Kinzhal hypersonic missile and they ain't going to be around long. And we already know the United States nor any other country, the Russians, they do have one thing. They have hypersonic missiles, and not these hypersonic glide missiles, hypersonic missiles that are powered the entire way. So the United States does not have anything that can defend itself from a missile coming in at 10, 12, 14,000 miles an hour. They don't have any way to defend themselves. They don't have any way to track them. They don't have any way to, any computers that can mathematically figure out where they're going to be and send a missile to meet them to stop them. They can't do it right now. They're sitting ducks when the hypersonic missiles come in. Well, that ain't no way to fight a war. Because if there's any priority target that the Russians want, it doesn't have a chance. It's going to get hit by hypersonic missiles. And rather than spend the last umpteen amount of years trying to figure out how to do hypersonic missiles, I don't know if we could or couldn't, apparently there wasn't enough money in that. So the U.S. said, we'll spend these corporations said, we'll spend all of our monies developing a flying piano called the F-35. Look it up. It's nothing but trouble. They're crashing all the time. People are taking them out of service. They rust like hell. Apparently, if you look it up, look up F-35s and rust, you'll see pictures of them. For some reason, the paint or whatever coating they use that's supposed to block and absorb radar doesn't last really long or whatever, and it ends up they're covered with rust. And something tells me that if you're covered with rust is not going to absorb or deflect radar. So you're not going to be real stealthy if you're rusty. Rusty does not equal stealthy, right? And they're extremely expensive. So what you end up again is think about your Air Force. You end up with it. Think about your Navy. You end up building things that you can't build as many because they're so high tech and they're expensive. And the idea, even there being with the idea that the military industrial complex has put to the United States government is you don't need as many things because the things that you have will be so technologically superior to your adversary that they'll work. But that ain't so. The only thing they're going to be is very, very expensive, and these companies will make a fortune. So what we're seeing on the battlefield of Ukraine here, what we're seeing, drinking my water here, what we're seeing is a bunch of corporations that are really good at making a profit, but not so good at flooding the military theater with quality, reliable, inexpensive, right? Think about this. Quality, it's got to work, reliable, inexpensive. And when I say quality, here's what I mean. My half brother was in the military, and he'd talk about military stuff. And he said, look, we use the M16s and they use the Kalashnikovs. And he said, the big difference is, he said, now the Kalashnikov has a much longer range. The Kalashnikov is much heavier, so it's hard to run with, but it's cheaper, and they made a hell of a lot of them. In Iraq, they would just fire a bunch of them and leave them lay there and run off and go get more. They had them everywhere, right? So they're inexpensive. They're reliable. And he said, and here's the other difference. You got an M16, you get a little mud, a little bit of dirt in it. You got to clean it because it's good. It's precision, but It needs to be clean in order to work well, and otherwise it could jam, etc. He says you take them stinking AK-47s, you bury it in the mud for a month, take it out, spray a little water around it, and that damn thing's firing. He said he's seen some of the the machine guns and things like that some of these countries make, and he says, and they've taken them out of the mud and start firing them, and there's mud flying all over the place where this thing's just throwing and it's working, right? Why? Because the idea of me is I want it to work. It's not made to make a big profit. It's made to be a machine gun. It's made to be military hardware. It's made to work. Whereas in the US, things now, if you understand that there was a time when there was at least some kind of a balance in America between making military hardware that worked and making a profit. And now it's gone the complete other way, where it is now all about making a profit. All of these things. So now, if you notice, whether it's the Challenger tanks or the M1A1 or the whatever the latest plane that comes out, there's a PR offensive that comes out with it to tell us how wonderful it is, to explain how awesome it is and all the incredible things it'll do. Why? Because it's so damn expensive that people have to be able to be convinced to buy it. If somebody's trying to get you to buy a drone, right? A little DJI drone right there, right? But if somebody says, Garland, we want you to buy a drone. And I'm like, how much is it? $1,800. $1,800? I get $1,800 for a drone. But, Garland, wait till you see what this drone will do. So they got to show me all the magic that this drone will do and all of these other things. Why? Because they want me to give them $1,800 stinking dollars for a drone. And so they've got to have all of the bells and whistles and all of this magical things on it to get that kind of money. Why do they want that kind of money? Because they're trying to make a profit, and they're going to take that profit and buy back their own stock so they can artificially increase the value of their stock, you raise the dividends, make more money. That's what it's all about. Now, they want the drones to look good. They want them to have all of these special features and all of that. But if you so much as get a piece of speck of dust on that stinking thing, it ain't going to work because it's too high tech. It's too high tech. The battlefield ain't high tech. They learned that, all over the world. You kind of have to deal with cold in the battlefield. You gotta have to deal with sand, gritty sand. You gotta have to deal with mud and all kinds of stuff you could have to deal with. But the battle techs are not high tech. So low tech wins on the battlefield. Low tech wins, number one, because it can get dirty and still work. But low tech wins, number two, because you can flood the battlefield with stuff. And when it comes down to it, as we're seeing warfare look, when the U.S. was fighting Afghanistan, it was industrial warfare. I mean, these were guys in Toyota trucks with a machine gun mounted on the back. And need I mention, and we lost that one? We lost the war with a bunch of guys in friggin' Toyota trucks. But now the U.S. is fighting some people who know how to fight a war, and they have a combination of high tech. See, Russia uses that combination of high tech precision weapons with old low tech stuff that just throws rounds down range. That's inexpensive. That's old. That's a lot of the stuff. See, one of the things the Russians have done is they've mothballed all of their old stuff just in case they need it. So they got all of this old mothballed stuff, and people, look at some of the stuff that the Russians are using. Yeah, is it working? Are they using it? Is it on the battlefield? Is it able to traverse the area because it works? Is it able to put rounds downfield? Do you think some guy running because there's artillery rounds all around him is going to say, I'm not scared of that artillery round? Why? Because it came out of an old howitzer. No, he's running for his life. He don't care. He doesn't know where it came from. He just knows that artillery rounds are coming. Why? Because the Russians got a lot of artillery. And you got to understand something. If you understand the amount of stuff that the Soviet Union made, the amount of stuff that the Russians mothballed, you understand that they haven't even touched. They haven't even touched the amount of stuff that they got sitting mothballed. And which means in all likelihood, they've got people who are taking it out, oiling in it just in case they need it against NATO, right? But the amount of stuff that the Russians, I remember at one point during the Cold War, they had 20,000 tanks or something crazy like that. What do you think? They just threw them away? Yeah, how many howitzers do you think they had? Do you think they just threw them away and melted them down? No, they didn't. They put that stuff aside and they set it in case we need it. And if they need it, they'll fix it up and get it going. And you know what? What are you going to stand there? Hey, those are a bunch of old tanks coming at us. How many? 500. Uh-oh. This is a problem. Yeah, but we got 20 new challengers. Yeah, but they got 500 tanks coming at us, and all of them are firing, and all of them will fire, and they'll keep running, and they'll work in this part of they'll work in the cold, and they'll work in whatever. They may not go fast, they may not be pretty, but they got a lot of them. So it's my point being not that the Russians have old stuff, but that they have a combination, a healthy balance of old stuff that still works and new stuff. They're not just only able to use new high-tech stuff that you can't produce a lot of it. And so the neoliberal economic order now is on the battlefield in Ukraine, and we're seeing it play out in a real world kinetic confrontation. In a confrontation that says the war in Ukraine, you got to understand something about the war in Ukraine. It's World War II type stuff. You've got a contact line that's 1,000 kilometers long. This is old World War I, World War II stuff. This is old school stuff. This is not where everything is going to be high tech. Yeah, do they use a lot of drones and spotting drones? Yeah, but there's firefights, there's tank fights, there's artillery duels. Yeah, right. So there's old kind of stuff going on along this 1,000 miles. You're not. So if you've got a contact line that's 1,000 miles long, you can't possibly have all new high tech stuff. You can't make that much stuff. It's 1,000 miles long. For me, it's here to Florida. It's a long drive from here to Florida. And the whole time there's going to be a military gear. Trust me when I tell you this, we can't produce that kind of stuff. Neither can Russia, really. Nobody can produce that kind of stuff consistently in this day and age unless they got a couple years ahead. But if you got a bunch of old stuff sitting around and the new stuff is designed to be made in high numbers with a balance between this high-tech stuff and this effective and efficient stuff that works, you're going to have the advantage. So what we're looking at is a sorry about this. If you would give me 1 second, I got a little interruption that I got to do a text on. Okay. So at any rate, sorry about that. I apologize when I have to do that kind of stuff, when I do that stuff, but it was an important family matter that I had to send a text back. It happens, we're on YouTube here, so we can get away with that kind of stuff. So bottom line is that's what I was talking about. That's what I was getting at when I said it's neoliberalism meeting the battlefield. And that is that a battlefield's old school. That's all it is. I guess that's all I'm saying. A battlefield is old school. A battlefield is violent. A battlefield is brutal. A battlefield is about the elements. Neoliberalism is new school. Neoliberalism is about, do you have the right diversity in the military? It's about, do you have these tanks that will do magical things and can connect in various ways and all this kinds of stuff? Do you have M777 howitzers that connect to GPS guided things and that you can download stuff into their computers from the cloud and all this kind of stuff that cost a fortune, that allows the company that makes them to make a fortune, but they can't make enough of them to make a difference on a 1,000-kilometer contact line. And to add this, and this is the other part of it, and this is important, I think. And the other part of neoliberalism is neoliberalism has to go around the world and it has to control things. And neoliberalism has to go around the world and it has to intimidate the poor countries and it has to keep them down and it has to coup their governments and it has to fight all over the place, right? Which means you got to have a lot of stuff everywhere. So right now, can the United States consider taking all of their military hardware out of the Middle East, out of Asia, out of Africa and bringing it all to one point. No, they're spread too thin. And that's something that neoliberalism does. You got to be all over the world trying to run the world, which means if you get in a fight in any one particular place, that means the only way to adequately address that is to get all your stuff from everywhere else. But neoliberalism can't do that because you got to continue to fight. You got to continue to control everything everywhere. It's massively overstretched. And that is the nature of the neoliberal order, because it is controlling everything everywhere. And now you got one big fight. The Russians, what are they doing? The Russians are saying, yeah, we got some people, we got some stuff going on in Syria. We got a couple of bases. We got a Navy base. We got an Air Force base in Syria. That works in conjunction with the locals because they're welcome there, unlike the US. So we got two things. We got Syria. If you're Russians, you got Ukraine. What else? Where else are they fighting? Where else are the Russians fighting? Nowhere. Nowhere. Where else are they trying to overthrow governments or whatever? Nowhere. They got their stuff at home. They're protecting their borders, and they've got some bases in Syria where they have national interest, and of course, the Syrian government is one of their allies, so they're there. The neoliberal order has to have Southcom, which are bases all over South America. They got to have Africom, which is bases all over Africa. You see what I'm saying? They got to have the Middle East. They've got entire series of bases. They've clumps and conglomerations of bases in different parts of the world that are all the Africom is supposed to keep neoliberal order in Africa. So that means they can't send the stuff to Ukraine. That means if you lose somewhere else, you lose because you're in a pickle. What happens if they take all their stuff out of Africa? It's possible that China and Russia will say, "Well, we'll move some stuff in there." Not to mention this, they'll lose control of the puppet governments that they have. It's a mess. They're overreached. They're creating things that they can't create the volume of them that they need, and that they're so high tech that they won't work in the dirty, filthy battlefield environment. So they believe that they can just they believed it with this war, that they could just take the capital because they can, remember, it's the other part of it, it's critical. What the neoliberals believed and the oligarchs believed with the Westerns, that they can print unlimited money and they can take that money and use it to buy unlimited weapons and ammunition. Therefore, they can defeat Russia. But because of the neoliberal effect on industry and commodities, even with the money, the stuff ain't there for them to buy. They got the money. They can print unlimited money, but the stuff is not there for them to buy, to send. And the stuff that is there for them to buy, to send, is too high tech to be of a great value on the battlefield. Okay, let's look and see if I can get to the beginning. Here we go. All right, let's see about the super chats, if there are any. Sparky says, make Ukraine Russia again. Sparky is always in the house. Let's keep looking. How about Valley S? Valley S says, you're the best, S. Garland. Thanks for all you do. Thanks, Valley S. You're the bestest. Love Valley S. All right, let's go. Chicka Boom Boom 2 says, I wouldn't be surprised if fentanyl is found in Capitol Hill. Yeah, you're right. Well, Hunter Biden's there. It ain't going to be fentanyl. He's a kook guy. Kevin Horton, thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, I guess Hunter Biden and Zelensky must have had a meeting. All right. Oh, what do we got here? Let's look at Sparky says, used to bid against General Dynamics and Hughes Electronics years ago. Their non-competitive practices were terrible. The FTC didn't care. That's right. That's neoliberalism. It's all the game, man. They're there to make money. And oh boy, there's 36 people over here. Gandhi said there are hundreds of ways to deal with the Arabs if Israel puts down the British bayonet. Interesting. Chicken Patty's over there. Maria Rinaldi is over there. Henry Hart is over there. Thanks a lot, everybody. Well, let me just look and see if anybody had anything to say. All right. Rolf Steiner says, if you cannot identify the real enemy, the British, you're just killing each other and not defeating the real problem. Sean says, put your money in bricks. It's backed by real gold. Then blow up Washington, D.C. problem fault. So let me say one thing. I will say something about this, but backing things with gold. I don't think that BRICS is just going to back their currency with gold. I think they'll back it with they've used this term, a basket of commodities. There is an inherent problem. There was a time when backing um, money in gold had been done for centuries, and it had a value to it, and it was better than just nothing. Don't get me wrong. But I think in this day and age, you're going to find something different. Here's the reason. Think about this in this day and age. If something's backed by gold and somebody finds 10 new gold mines and floods the market with gold, whatever's backed by gold takes a hit, right? So if you're backed by a single commodity, you notice the BRICS people, you notice the Russians, the Chinese, etc. They're saying we're going to do it with a basket of commodities. If in fact you back stuff only by gold, then your money is in fact tied directly to the gold market. And if a lot of gold floods the market from new gold mines, it can have a significant negative effect on your money. You are tied and you are burdened by the value of gold. You got to worry. If it's tied to gold, if they're like, hey, guess what? Namibia just found $84 trillion in gold, you better be worried because the value of your currency could just take a flat hit. Whereas if you do it with a basket of currencies, right? One of the things you can damn sure be assured that the BRIC currency will be backed by a basket of commodities, including oil, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela is going to be in there eventually. If you've got these gigantic oil producing countries in there, well, then oil is a good way to do it because you can also use that to help manipulate the price of oil and keep the value of your price of oil up. But then there's other things. For instance, gas. Russia creates gas, does a lot of gas. Iran now has these gigantic gas fields. You think Qatar won't be very, very interested in gas? So you're going to have gas. You're going to have gold. You've got some African countries that got doing some gold. You got copper. You got lots of things. So I think you'll look at maybe if I'm doing it, I'm thinking gold, oil, gas, copper, titanium. See what I'm saying? I look at the things, maybe even wheat. Possibly. I don't know, because the thing about wheat and agriculture, things like that, are there. You could have drought, you could have things like that could affect it. But again, if there's enough of these currencies that could offset that, I think what you look at is you look at the members of BRICS and you look at what those members have to, or what commodities they dominate, what commodities they're really strong in, and you base your BRICS currency on a basket of commodities that those countries are strong in. Therefore, it always keeps those countries strong. If your country comes with copper, titanium, right? Let's say copper, and copper is one of the foundations of the BRICS currency, and your country puts out a lot of copper, it keeps your country strong, it keeps your currency strong, it keeps you in the mix as part of it, and it makes it easier for you to do things in local currencies, for you to use the BRICS currency. So I think we'll see at least oil, at least gas, then I'm sure gold, maybe copper, maybe titanium, a couple other things, nickel, some of the things that are important, maybe some of the things that China has. China has some of the some great, what do you call it? Precious metals and rare earth minerals. So maybe some of the precious metals and rare earth minerals that China has. So you're going to basically, in a nutshell, you're going to see BRICS foundation. The foundation of BRICS is going to be a basket of currencies, and it will be those currencies that are produced by the members of BRICS that they can control, that they can create, and then they can create cartels. Just think about this. If one of the foundations is gas, then you create a gas cartel. Russia makes a lot of gas. Algeria, they got a lot. Russia has a lot of gas. Algeria's got a lot of gas, right? Iran has these humongous gas fields that they just found, that Russia has a $40 billion contract to develop their gas fields. You think Russia ain't going to want gas going to be a part of it? You think Algeria isn't? What about Qatar, right? So the bottom line is you're going to have things that help the individual countries, that give them strength and power economically and make them part of the game. And they'll be happy and they will be invested. So I look for BRICS to be going strong. It's going to take a couple years. Let me see. Anything else? I think that's it. Ooh, I think I just saw another super chat. Let's see this. Anything you can tell us about Erdogan's backstab move? Look, This is Erdogan. It's who he is. I mean, from time to time, that's what he's going to do. Erdogan's going to act on behalf of Erdogan. I think the Russians know who Erdogan is. I think they understand that every 6 months, Erdogan's going to do something to infuriate them. And look, I think Erdogan must have like a plan, like a calendar. And he looks at it every 6 months and says, okay, have we done anything to really piss off the Americans? No. Well, then it's time. What about the Russians? Yeah, the Russians are very happy. Well, what can we do to piss them off? I mean, he must have a plan to make sure that everybody he deals with every 6 months, he has to infuriate them, because he does it. But I think the Russians understand who he is. They made deal. Look, at the beginning, he's sending Bayraktar drones or whatever the hell they were to Ukraine, and the Russians were blowing the hell out of those till they won't work anymore. And now he makes a deal. Hey, whatever you do, though, I won't. So whatever, no matter what, I won't send the Nazis back. The Russians are like, all right, the Nazis can go there. You won't send them back? No. A year later, hey guys, you want the Nazis back? Yeah, here they go. But I think the Russians know who he is. They know who this guy is, and he's there. And the Russians are not going to just throw him aside because he has some value to them, and he ain't going to throw them aside because they got some value to him. Everybody's trying to eat. What's in it for me? And Erdogan is Erdogan. I'm never going to get shocked, mad, happy, or angry at Erdogan. Just every 6 months, he's going to do whatever the hell he wants to piss whoever the hell he wants off. Look, now he's sending the Nazis home, and he's saying perhaps Ukraine should be in NATO. Now, keep in mind something. He can say that because he knows there's no way in hell that Ukraine's going to be in NATO. He knows France will never say yes. He knows Germany will never say yes. He knows Hungary will never say yes. It has to be unanimous. And at this point, Biden has said he won't say yes. So if you think about it, it's like on Capitol Hill sometimes when they'll know they got enough bills, they got enough people to vote in something. And they'll tell the people, certain ones, they'll say, look, you go ahead, you can vote against it. We got enough votes for it. We know we can pass this bill. You, and you can vote against it. You need to for your reelection. You just go ahead and vote against it. It's going to pass anyway, right? Erdogan's the same way. Erdogan's like, look, I know Ukraine ain't getting into NATO, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say to the U.S., I'm pushing for Ukraine. I'm on your side with this one. Yes, Ukraine into NATO, and the U.S. is going to say we can't let them in. Well, you can't say I didn't give you a shot. I supported it. I wanted them in. He can say to Zelensky, see, Zelensky, I fought to get you into NATO. Unfortunately, nobody else did, but that's the way it goes. Sorry about that. It's Erdogan. Never get freaked out over Erdogan. The guy's going to do whatever the hell he's going to do on any given stinking day. Oh, let's see. I think that's it. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I'm out of here. 953 people. That should mean 953 likes. Smash that like button. Slam that like button. Take your foot and kick the like button right on your screen. Make sure that like button knows that you had your merry way with it, right? Make sure that we do the like button. Also, one last thing. Let's not forget, if you can, buymeacoffee.com, Cash App, Patreon, and now Buy Me a Coffee. You can do just like Patreon. You could say, I'm going to do $5 a month, $10 a month. You can do subscription on Buy Me a Coffee just like Patreon, or you can just, it'll say, buy Garland a coffee, $5. And you can do 1, 5, 10. How many coffees do you want? Buymeacoffee.com/GarlandNH. Follow me on, please follow me on Telegram. We got about 5,000 followers on Telegram. I need some more. PayPal is an option. Certainly appreciate it if you can use PayPal to contribute to the channel. Patreon.com. You see the business there. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget, last but not least, everybody go to my rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. Become a member. It costs nothing. If they throw me off YouTube, voila, there you are. Okay. And last but not least, if you can afford it on Rockfin, become a subscriber. You can subscribe to the channel. You don't have to become a subscriber. You can become a member. It doesn't cost anything. You can see everything, but a subscriber will I certainly appreciate it. It's $14.99 a month if you can become a subscriber. And if you join up for a year, they give you a couple months off. It comes to like $12 and something a month. If you can afford that, please do that on rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. My email is garlandin@gmail.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. And please, if you may not be able to afford to anything to help the channel, which is fine. You just watch it and enjoy it. The only thing I would ask everybody to do is share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. Peace. I'm out.